Hi, and here we are. We're live. Welcome to another episode of Leadership Studio. My name is Todd Karges, and I get to talk to really interesting people on all leadership topics when we do these things. Today, I am here with my friend and colleague, Kate Arms. Kate, before we jump in, would you please introduce yourself to the folks that are listening?
I'd be happy to. So I'm Kate Arms, and I do coaching in organizational and personal settings. And so sort of relevant for this conversation, I teach leadership, I coach leaders, and I am a parent and I coach parents. And so there's like a wonderful, wonderful intersection when I coach leaders who are parents. So looking forward to where we go with this.
Fantastic. So let's do that, because our let's just jump right in. Our topic today is, does leadership begin at home? And when you and I were talking about, let's have a conversation around the intersection between parenthood and leadership. I will admit that part of me was like, oh, I'm a little scared about that because I'm not a parent, and you know that. But I'm also really intrigued by this conversation. And you know what? I forgot to say this before I get too far into it. Folks that are listening, you know how this works. If you want to participate in this conversation, just put your put your information in the chat. We will interact with you. But let's get this thing started, right? So, does leadership begin at home? Does it? Why is this really an important conversation that we need to have?
So I think that is a really valuable conversation to have for a lot of reasons. I think from a sort of corporate, how do we develop leaders perspective, one of the things we talk about a lot is that leaders don't get trained. They just come in and do what they do. And actually, that means that what they're doing is what they've had modeled as leadership. And the first model of leadership that we ever have as human beings is our parents.
It is, isn't it?
And so under stress, we devolve to our level of training. And your first leadership role is very stressful. And so you're devolving to your level of training. And if you haven't gotten explicit leadership training, you're building on, what did you learn from your parents? What did you learn from your teachers? What did you observe from the leaders that you've worked with? And so actually that starts at home. So for that reason, I think that it's a really valuable conversation to have. I also think it's a really valuable conversation to have for people who are coming up in their careers. And if they're parents before they have a formal leadership role, to think that parenting is actually an opportunity to build leadership skills is a really interesting insight that helps both at work and at home. Sort of the other piece of it is that if we're conscious about that as parents, then we can be conscious about what we're giving our kids. And so we're actually training the next generation of leaders as we're parenting. And if we're doing all of that consciously, we can be doing all of that consciously. And so why not talk about it?
Yeah. Well, it's so interesting because it sounds like, and this is the thing that's interesting, because what I'm hearing is, parenthood is leadership. Like, it just is.
It just is.
Like it just is. So there's a choice, and some parents do it really well, and some parents, struggle with it. And this is not to judge or anything, like good parent, bad parent. I don't care about that stuff. It's just within the context of raising kids, you are in a leadership role. And what I think I'm hearing is, even the fact of thinking of it as an act of leadership rather than something else is important.
It changes how you think of yourself as a parent. Okay. So I've been a parent for 22 years, and I can still remember the sheer panic of the transition from not being a parent to being a parent, and you have an infant that you have to take care of. That it is so easy to be a victim of circumstances in that place, to be like, here's this need, I have to do this, like I have to be, it's so easy to be scared in that. And it's so easy as the kids get older to parent the kid you had 6 months ago and to be like playing catch up the whole time. And if you can make the conceptual shift to I am the leader, then you have a choice about what kind of leader do you want to be. And you get to engage with, am I in a father knows best system? Am I in a collaborative problem solving system? And am I leading as a, like, I know what the right outcome is and my kids should be a doctor or a lawyer and then have a right solution? Or am I engaging agilely with goals that are more abstract? Like, I want them to want to come home for the holidays, which is a great parenting goal, by the way.
Mm-hmm. I want my kids to come home for.
I want my like my goal is that my kids want to come home to the holidays. They don't come home out of a sense of obligation is a really great goal, because it prioritizes the quality of relationship.
Wow. Well, and so I want to glom onto that, right? Prioritizing the quality of the relationship, and that's a phrase that I've used within the context of leadership development from a business perspective. That's a phrase that I know other coaches use from the perspective of, just basic relationship coaching. I had another one of these conversations a little while ago, actually close to Valentine's Day, with a romantic relationship coach. And it was all about sort of the connection between, the quality of the relationship. And I think what I'm loving about what I'm hearing here is that within the context of parenting, it's often sort of the first opportunity that you have to be really super intentional about, sort of creating that quality of relationship, because the thing that it has, whether it's good or bad or indifferent, is also that hierarchy, right? Like, there's a responsibility difference between parent and child that doesn't exist within, romantic partners or even partnerships within a corporate standpoint, right? Like, there is someone who has a very real dependence on you.
Yeah. Like, so when I make the corporate parallel, I think that it's like when you are dependent on a job and you are working for somebody, the leader has very much the same kind of relationship to you, or as a leader, you have to someone who's dependent on you for a job, you have very much the same relationship that a parent with a child.
Okay. So so it's really interesting because, in one of the lead up posts that I bashed out onto LinkedIn when we were talking about this, I have intentionally avoided sort of parenthood analogies, specifically because what you just said kind of rubs me the wrong way.
Well, because it's really, really complicated. Because it's really, really complicated because the context of corporate leadership, you have to be prepared to disown your child. Like, if you're going to take the analogy, like, that's what you have to be prepared to do.
You have to be prepared to disown your child, and you have to be prepared for your child to disown you. Because the thing is, within that context, right, as the employee, I have a bunch of agency that I don't have as a child.
This is what I love. This is what I love about the analogy. And I love this analogy because most parents don't actually take seriously the fact that adult children disengage from their parents all the time.
Right.
Like, if you don't focus on the quality of relationship while you're parenting, especially in an individualistic culture that is like, you get to high school and we kick you out. If you haven't created a quality of relationship, there, you haven't actually given the kids much reason to come home. If you want adult children in your life, and I gotta tell you, adult children are so much easier to have a fun conversation with than 7-year-olds.
Yep, I can imagine that.
I mean, one of the nice things about the way that we ruin relationships between parents and children is that we make it by parenting for compliance. We make teenagers need to rebel, and then it's a relief when they leave home. And so, like, we have actually sort of made it comfortable for them to leave home. But having prioritized the quality of relationship in my own parenting, the teenage years are the best years.
Okay, so there's, go ahead.
So like, I'm just sort of thinking like, you didn't want to sort of go into this analogy piece, and I can write an analogy or a metaphor way too far. So I want to give you the opportunity to pause and stop and turn the
Well,
direction.
no, because here's like, here's the thing. I think the thing that I love about this conversation is, and where I think we started was, you know, there is this opportunity, right, within the context of this thing that we all experienced, right, whether it's being parents, or if not, then having had parents or caregivers, right, who operated within that space. So
Thank you for
we've
using the word caregiver there, please. Like, I just want to acknowledge, thank you, because lots of people are raised by people who are not their parents, and they
yes.
still had caregivers.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that, like, even that relationship, and before we started, like before we went on camera, we were talking about, well, what if we started with that relationship, like that relationship as a child with, with your parent or your caregiver, or whoever it was that was, sort of providing for you, because that hierarchy exists. And it's really, whether we choose to admit it or whether our caregivers chose to admit it, that was our first experience of leadership having been led. and
Yeah.
and there's something about that, like the other phrase that's popping up for me, Kate, when I think about that is, eh, this may not be 100% true, but it's helpful sometimes. But the way that we do one thing is the way we do all things.
Yeah.
And so much of, like, when I think of myself, and so much of how I show up as, and showed up in my corporate life, and the things that I learned about compliance from my parents and at school, and what I learned about achievement from my parents and at school, not all of which was damaging, but not all of which was not damaging either. It certainly informed sort of my expectations of myself, and it informed how I showed up as a leader,
Yeah. And
and
I bet
not
it
always in a good
showed,
way.
yeah, I bet it showed up in your relationship to struggle.
Oh,
And because when I
yes.
think, and the
Yes.
reason that I say that in this is because one of the most difficult choices as a parent,
Hmm.
and you make it every day,
Hmm.
is how much do I let my child struggle? Because too little struggle and the child doesn't learn to become able to take care of themselves.
Hmm.
And too much struggle is overwhelming. And so if you're paying attention as a parent, you are constantly gauging, is this a reasonable amount of struggle that I am asking my child
Hmm.
to engage in?
Hmm.
And as a leader, particularly one with direct reports who are sort of growing into roles,
Hmm.
we're faced with that question all the time. Particularly if it's a role we could do.
Hmm.
How much do we tell them what to do? How much do we do it,
Hmm.
take over and do it for them? How much do we let them suffer as they're going through the process? It's absolutely a place that we learn, and that as parents we teach how to engage with that.
Okay. So I've got a story, because something popped up, and like, on this show, many people have heard, sort of, I think the people who watch this thing know kind of my professional history. So, what I'm going to say to that, to what you just said, is that the time that I felt like I most stepped into leadership, like really stepped into leadership, like really kind of got it,
Yeah.
was the first time that I started leading a team where they were doing jobs that I couldn't do.
Mm-hmm.
Like, where I actually had to trust that they knew what they were talking about.
Yeah.
I couldn't look at their work and evaluate it and say, you're doing well, you're not doing well.
Yep.
And yeah, there was a release that had to go, but I had always attributed that, to be perfectly honest, I'd always attributed that to sort of like trust, right? But as we're speaking, it feels a little bit like the adult children analogy.
Mm.
Right? Like, suddenly, there's these people who are with you because they want to be with you,
Mm-hmm.
not because they need you to tell them how to do the thing, whatever that thing is.
Yeah.
Right? I'm all over the place on this one. It just came to me, but I don't know. Like, I'm gonna stop talking.
There's so much that's bubbling up for me. And I think like the anecdotes are sort of interesting. So one of the things that your viewers don't know about me, unless they know it from other contexts, is that I have 4 kids and 3 of them are 5 minutes apart. And so when you talk about like not being able to control in that context of like, I can't tell them what to do because they know more than I do. One of the gifts of being a mother of triplets is that you don't have enough hands. It does not feel like a gift when the children are under 18 months old, when the really hands-on stuff. But when they're a little bit older, I actually had to consciously choose to let my kids take more risks. I had to be willing to go, okay, so my kids are 2 years old and they like the playground for the 5-year-olds. I can actually keep them where it's like totally boring and safe and they're not going to have any fun. I can like corral them, or I can let them run around the playground that is too big for me to catch them if they fall. And I had an older child and I knew what it was like to run around and really enjoy being there to spot them. But when I had the triplets, I had to be like, okay, what is a catastrophic failure I have to avoid? And what is the risk that I'm willing to be like, okay, if you fall off and you hurt yourself and we're in the emergency room, is that a risk I'm willing to take?
Right.
Eat.
The other thing that's showing up for me right now as you're talking about this is that, parenting is an excellent leadership experience, and it's much higher stakes than what most of us have to deal with.
The stakes are so high. Yeah.
That at the beginning of this conversation, before we got on camera, one of the questions that I asked was like, what do we want people to walk away with this conversation from? Right. I'm just sort of opening the hood for folks right now because, we always say that stuff. We don't really say that that's what we said. But I think one of the things that we didn't say that's popping up for me is, and I've often said this, is, hey, parents, cool. Congratulations. Like, I have so much admiration for parents, even people, like anyone who even attempts it. I have so much admiration for that. And I think, hearing you describe it that way, with its stakes being high and like how much risk is too much risk, is like, I can't think of a corporate problem that compares to what you've just described. Like a real one.
I mean, I think the thing that as a coach surprises some of the senior leaders that I work with is I have had senior leadership positions in small organizations, but I have not had senior leadership positions in big organizations. So I coach leaders who are working in much bigger organizations than I am frequently. And one of the things that surprises them sometimes is how comfortable I am with the level of stress and anxiety that they are under. And I directly attribute it to having to decide how to handle the fact that I had 3 15-month-olds that if I left them alone, if I left any 2 of them alone together, I came back to an armful of bites. Right? Like actually learning how to navigate that. Like my ability to like regulate my nervous system and to sort of go, okay, what's actually really important here? And what am I willing to say? Society says I should do it this way, but actually in this context, it doesn't work. So I'm going to do what works, not what I've been told needs to happen.
I have an urge in this conversation because I think like I love where this is going, and I think that there's a lot of really rich learning here. But I think just and maybe for my own sake, what I'd love for us to do, if you're willing, is maybe just sort of take a look at it from like from a practical boots on the ground perspective.
Okay.
And what I'm kind of thinking is you know, I'm not a parent, but let's say I was. If I was a parent and I was, you know, I don't know, like, and I'm also looking at, you know, I'm mid-career and I'm in a leadership position, and I've never thought of parenthood as leadership school
Yep.
before.
Yep.
Like, it's just because I think I'm making up that there's probably a whole bunch of people in this situation. Like parenthood, leadership, they're two different things. I'm in this space, you know. What do I do with that? Like, what? Like, is it too late?
Or it's never too late. It's
okay,
never too late.
So like, if we were to get really practical from a coaching perspective to move this needle, right? I've got the parenthood experience, and I've got this desire, this urge to move into leadership, and I've not put them together, but now I want to.
Okay. So there are a couple of things. One is notice the parallels. Mm-hmm. So if you're co-parenting, the collaboration skills that you need to make decisions for the children. So we know in parenting literature, we know that if parents are aligned and children have stability and they know what's expected, that they grow up more secure. This mm-hmm. is kind of like in the corporate world, where if you have sort of multiple strands of leadership and you have to work together as a leadership team, if you're aligned as a leadership team, then the people who report up to you know what to do and can do it without you micromanaging. So the first thing is to start noticing those parallels. You have people at your peer level, your co-parent, and then you have this hierarchy. As a parent, watching your children to know how developed they are in various places. We do it microscopically when they're little. When they're infants and when they don't have words, we do it so like, what could that cry possibly mean? And as soon as they get words, we start expecting them to be able to explain themselves. And that's a huge mistake. Because people are able to articulate words that sound like they know what they're talking about long before they actually understand their values, their motivation, how their internal systems work, and that sort of thing. And so we still, as parents, need to be watching and learning for all of those nonverbals. Oh, if I put this kind of toy out, my kid goes for it. And if I put this kind of toy out, my kid doesn't go for it. And if I put the same toy out in blue and red, that kid likes blue and that kid likes red. Like, we notice those. And that's the same kind of stuff that if we've got a team and work is being done by people, it's going to get done differently. And some of them are going to like one part of the process and some of them are going to be skilled at another part of the process. And what they say about what they're doing and what they're going to deliver isn't necessarily the same as what they actually do and deliver. And so there's this opportunity of playing in the watching the nonverbals, learning to read the context that you can keep yourself doing in both contexts. And so those are parallels. And the other thing is, if you're leading a team, you've got objectives, you've got outcomes, you've got goals you're trying to get towards. And depending on your context, there's going to be a more or less wiggly line to get there. Some places the line's pretty direct. Lots of places where I have worked, the line is very wiggly to get to the outcome on the corporate things. Parenting context, the outcome, you've got some kind of goals that you want for your kids. You want them to be healthy, happy. Maybe you want them to find a partner. Maybe you want them to, have a certain level of financial stability. So because you have some ideas about sort of what that will offer them. In parenting, they're frequently less tangible, but in corporate, there's often we need this revenue level of goal that there are lots of different ways to get to.
Yes.
In the same way, like the kid is happy, there can be lots of different ways
To get the kid to happy. Yep.
Right. And so in today, when I'm making decisions and I'm at home with the kid and the kid is going through some kind of chaos, I have to sort of figure out like, okay, what can I do today that leads more towards my goal of happy kid or happy young adult or happy things? Just like in a corporate setting, like what's going on today? Where do I go? So I think what you do is you look for those parallels
and experiment. And like, because the ingredient that I think is immediately coming to me when you're talking about that is the room to experiment, which means the room to fail.
Yeah. And so when I'm coaching people who are managers and like wanting leadership coaching and have small kids, often they'll come to me for coaching in the context that feels more challenging to them, and will practice in the context that feels easier, and then
so cool.
to the other context.
That's really, really cool. That's really, really cool.
It is really cool.
Yeah. Well, and what I love about that is you know, we coach people, not roles.
Yeah.
Right. And you know, every leader is a person.
Yep.
Every parent is a person.
Yep.
And at the end of the day, that's kind of the context that we all share. And yeah, stuff to be learned. This is really interesting. Listen, I like, this is another one of those times when I could keep going, but I'm looking at the time. We've got like 3 minutes left. What's the thing that you would like folks to walk away from this conversation with? What's the most important thing?
So I think that I have two things, because we're talking about two contexts that have analogies. And the first is leaders in organizations who are trying to hire leaders. I would love for them to know that parenting is a leadership context. So when you're looking at who has the skill set to step into that role, you often you often have things you're not supposed to ask about parenting and that sort of thing. Like we have legal rules in there.
Yeah.
But you can ask questions like, are there other contexts that you've done leadership things in that are not on your resume? And I think it's really valuable to have that lens that there are these non-work, really powerful places for developing the soft skills, the transferable skills. They're not the craftsmanship skills, but the other skills.
Well, the creation of excellent relationships.
Yes.
Right? Like that's, you know, the skill that leads to having adult children who want to come home for the holidays.
Yeah. And then from the parenting perspective, I actually think that there's a lot of material in the leadership literature about like how to have a coach-like relationship with your reports, how to collaborate, that I think is not in the parenting and romantic relationship, like partnering literature. In ways that are accessible to everyone. I think that particularly for people who have been raised really sort of analytically and really like structurally, and let's use the language of science and that sort of thing, go to the leadership literature to figure out how to parent. And if you're having trouble with your relationships with your direct reports, go to some of the parenting literature. Like once we get to be adults, if we can cross domains, so many more resources.
I love that. What a great takeaway. It's going to make me want to read some parenting books. And I might start with yours. I might just start with yours. You wrote a book.
I did write a book, and the very first section of my book, which is called L.I.F.T, A Coach Approach to Parenting, is a philosophical description about how to take coaching principles into leadership in the hierarchical relationship of parenting. And then the second half of the book is actually some coaching sort of tips and tricks about how to, when your kids can't articulate their goals,
Mm-hmm.
because kids don't know enough to articulate their goals.
Mm-hmm.
How can you have goals on behalf of your kids that have enough flexibility for them to be who they're becoming?
I love that.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Thank you. Thank you,
Thank
Kate.
you.
It's always a pleasure talking to you. Hey, so if folks want to get a hold of you, best way to do that would be?
Kate at signifiercoaching.com or Kate
Okay.
Arms at LinkedIn.
Okay. Sounds good. And we'll put that into the show notes for this on LinkedIn and YouTube. I'm Todd Karges. You can reach me at toddkarges.com, Todd at toddkarges.com. We're here on LinkedIn. And that's a wrap for today. Thank you very much. And thank you, Kate. Thank you, everyone else.
Thank you, Todd.
Okay. I'm going to turn this off.